The power of emotional self-mastery. Most people are not failing because they lack intelligence. They are failing because they lack control. Control over their reactions, control over their impulses, control over their emotions. The world does not reward those who are driven by emotion. It rewards composed people. Every regret you carry, every argument you lost, every decision you wish you could undo was made in an emotional state. Emotional self-mastery is not about being cold, it is about being precise. When you control your emotions, you control your behavior. When you control your behavior, you control your outcomes. This audiobook will teach you how to remain calm under pressure, how to stop reacting on impulse, and how to make decisions that move your life forward, even when everything inside you wants to explode. This is not motivation, this is discipline. And if you listen carefully, your emotional life will never be the same again.
Chapter 1. Your emotions are not the enemy. Your obedience is. Most people misunderstand emotions. They think emotions are the problem. They think anger is the problem, fear is the problem, anxiety is the problem, ego is the problem. That is wrong. Your emotions are not the enemy. Your obedience to them is. That's the key. An emotion is not a command. It is a signal. It is information. It is a notification, not an order. But most people live like emotional servants. They feel something and they move. They feel something and they speak. They feel something and they decide. No pause, no filter, no authority. And then they wonder why their life feels chaotic. Why are their relationships unstable? Why do their decisions keep backfiring? It's not bad luck. It's not intelligence. It's not the world being unfair. It's obedience. You feel anger and you obey it. You feel fear and you obey it. You feel insecurity and you obey it. You feel validation hunger and you obey it. And every time you obey an emotion without question, you give up control. You have a choice. Most people never realize that. They assume emotions are automatic, and therefore behavior must be automatic too. But that assumption is what keeps them weak. Feel it, but do not follow it. That sentence alone can change your life. Say it again. Feel it, but do not follow it. You are allowed to feel anger. You are not required to act on it. You are allowed to feel fear. You are not required to retreat because of it. You are allowed to feel insecure. You don't need to prove yourself. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's talk about anger first. Anger is one of the most misunderstood emotions on earth. People say anger is bad. No, uncontrolled anger is bad. Anger is a signal that a boundary has been crossed, or that your ego feels threatened. That's it.
Anger is information, but most people treat anger like a green light. They feel it and immediately accelerate. They raise their voice, they send the text, they insult, they threaten, they explode. And in that moment, they feel powerful. But that power is fake, because the moment you react in anger, you lose leverage, you lose credibility, you lose composure, you lose the ability to think clearly, and the person who stays calm automatically gains the upper hand. Always. That's not philosophy, that's reality. Think about the last argument you regret. You already know the moment it went wrong. There was a second, just 1 second, where you felt the surge, the heat in the chest, the tightening in the jaw, the urge to respond. That was the moment of choice. But you didn't pause. You obeyed. And obedience always comes with a cost. The cost might be an apology you didn't want to give. The cost might be a relationship that changed forever. The cost might be a reputation that quietly suffered. Short emotional relief, long-term damage. That's the pattern. It's not about anger. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about anger. It's about discipline. Feel it, but do not follow it. Now let's talk about fear. Fear is even more deceptive. Fear doesn't shout. It whispers. It says, wait. It says, later. It says, you're not ready yet. It says, what if it goes wrong? Fear rarely tells you to run. It tells you to delay. And delay destroys more lives than failure ever could. Fear-based procrastination looks reasonable. It disguises itself as planning, as preparation, as being responsible. But deep down, it's obedience. You feel uncertainty, and you obey it by stopping. You feel discomfort, and you obey it by avoiding. You feel doubt, and you obey it by waiting. Waiting for confidence, waiting for permission, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment never comes. You don't need their permission. You don't need certainty. You don't need to feel ready. You have a choice. That's the key. Fear is a signal that you're stepping into something meaningful. It is not a stop sign. But if you obey it long enough, fear becomes a lifestyle. You start calling yourself careful, realistic, not the risk-taking type. No, you are obedient. And obedience to fear shrinks your life inch by inch, not dramatically, quietly. One opportunity skipped, one conversation avoided, one decision delayed. And years later, you look back and feel a vague sense of regret, but you can't point to one single mistake, because it wasn't one mistake. It was a habit of obedience. Feel it, but do not follow it. Now, let's talk about ego. Ego is the most dangerous emotion because it feels like strength. Ego says, I can't let that slide. Ego says, I need to respond. Ego says, they need to know who I am. Ego demands performance. It pushes you to prove, to defend, to explain, to win arguments that don't matter. And every time you obey ego, you leak energy. You don't need their permission. You don't need their validation. You don't need to be understood by everyone. That's the key. Strong people don't rush to prove themselves. Weak people do. Ego-driven decisions are fast, loud, and expensive. You say yes when you should say no. You speak when silence would give you power. You commit when walking away would protect your future. Why? Because ego hates discomfort. The ego wants relief now. But relief is not the same as progress. Say it again. Relief is not progress. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Emotional self-mastery begins with one rule.
No emotion gets to drive without permission. Anger sits in the passenger seat. Fear sits in the passenger seat. Ego sits in the passenger seat. You drive. That doesn't mean you suppress emotions. Suppression makes them stronger. It means you observe them. You notice the feeling. You name it. You let it pass through without handing it the wheel. Feel it, but do not follow it. This is where most people fail. They think emotional mastery requires intensity. It doesn't. It requires patience. The pause is everything. Between feeling and action, there must be a gap. That gap is where power lives. One breath, one count to 5, one step back. That pause interrupts obedience, and interruption creates choice. You have a choice. That's the key. Let me give you a simple behavioral rule. Never respond at the emotional peak. Not emails, not messages, not conversations, not decisions. If your heart rate is elevated, you are not thinking clearly. This is not weakness. This is biology. Your nervous system is designed to react first and think later. Discipline means reversing that order. Think first, act second. That's emotional self-mastery. Another rule. If something triggers you, it owns you, unless you slow down. Triggers reveal attachments. Attachments create emotional volatility. The calmer you become, the fewer things control you. That's not spiritual talk. That's leverage. Calm people are harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to pressure. And that's why calm feels threatening to emotional people. They want a reaction. They want obedience. Don't give it to them. You don't need their permission. Here's the truth most people never hear.
You don't rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your emotional discipline. Good intentions don't matter when emotions take over. Motivation doesn't matter when anger is driving. Intelligence doesn't matter when fear is deciding. Discipline matters. That's the key. So what do you actually do? You train awareness. Every time you feel a surge, you label it. This is anger. This is fear. This is ego. Labeling creates distance. Distance creates control. Then you delay. Not forever, just long enough for clarity to return. And when clarity returns, you act deliberately, not emotionally, not impulsively, not reactively. This practice will feel uncomfortable at first because you are breaking a habit. You are no longer giving emotions instant obedience. Expect resistance. Your mind will say, "But I need to say something." No, you don't. Your mind will say, "But they're wrong." That can wait. Your mind will say, "But I'll look weak." No, you'll look composed. Composure always wins. Always. And here's the final truth of this chapter. You will never eliminate emotions. That is not the goal. The goal is authority. Authority over your inner state. Authority over your reactions. Authority over your behavior. When you stop obeying emotions, you stop being controlled by circumstances. And that is freedom. Feel it, but do not follow it. You mastered this distinction, emotion versus obedience. Now it's time to go deeper, because if reaction is obedience, then response is power, and that's exactly where we're going next.
Chapter 2. Reaction is weakness. Response is power. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. That distinction alone separates people who are controlled from dangerous people in the best possible way. Most people react. Very few respond, and that difference decides everything. Reaction is an emotional reflex. Response is disciplined action. Reaction is fast. Response is precise. The reaction feels satisfying for a moment. Response creates leverage for a lifetime. That's the key. Most people think speed equals strength. They think the fastest reply wins, the loudest voice wins, the sharpest comeback wins. That belief is wrong. Speed without control is weakness. Say it again. Speed without control is weakness. Reaction happens when emotion is driving. Response happens when discipline is driving. And the world rewards discipline. You have a choice. But you only have that choice if you slow down enough to see it. Let's make this clear. Reaction is unconscious. It happens before thinking finishes. Response is conscious. It requires a delay. And delay feels uncomfortable to people who are addicted to emotional release. That discomfort is where power lives. Pause is power. Delay is dominance. Repeat it. Pause is power. Delay is dominance. Let's start where most damage happens, the workplace. Someone challenges you in a meeting. Question your idea. Corrects you in front of others.
You feel it instantly. The chest tightens, the jaw sets, the mind races. That's the moment. That's the test. Reaction says, defend yourself now. Reaction says, push back immediately. Reaction says, don't let this slide. And if you obey that urge, you lose. You might feel strong for 10 seconds, but you lose status. You lose composure. You lose long-term respect. Because emotional reactions signal insecurity, even when you're right. Response does the opposite. Response pauses. Response listens fully. Response answers calmly, or not at all. Response might say, let's revisit that later. Or, that's an interesting point. And suddenly, the room shifts. The calmest person becomes the authority. Always. That's not personality. That's perception. People trust control. That's the key. Reaction feels powerful, but it hands power away. Response feels restrained, but it gathers power. It's not about being passive. It's about being strategic. Say it clearly. It's not about being passive. It's about being disciplined. Now let's talk about family arguments, because this is where reactions feel justified. You know how they are. They always push my buttons. I had to say something. No, you didn't have to react. You chose to. You have a choice. Family arguments follow a script. The same words, the same triggers, the same emotional explosions. And every time you react the same way, you reinforce the pattern. Reaction keeps cycles alive. Response breaks them. Pause is power. Delay is dominance. When someone raises their voice, reaction raises yours. Response lowers it. When someone attacks, reaction defends. Response observes. And observation creates clarity. Clarity changes the dynamic. You don't need their permission to be calm. You don't need their permission to pause. Silence is not surrender. Silence is control. Most people talk to release emotion. Strong people speak to move outcomes. That's the key. Now let's talk about online outrage, the most reactive environment ever created. Someone posts something offensive, wrong, ignorant. You feel the urge to comment, to correct, to attack. Reaction clicks reply. Response asks, what does this cost me? Time, energy, focus. Most online arguments don't change minds. They drain attention, and attention is your most valuable resource. Every emotional reaction online is a withdrawal from your focus account, and most people are broke. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need to win every argument. Winning arguments rarely wins lives. That's the key. Now let's go deeper. Reaction is driven by the nervous system, fight or flight. It's primitive, fast, protective. Response is driven by the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain. It requires space. That's why pause matters. If there is no pause, there is no response. Only reaction. Pause is power. Delay is dominance. Even a 2-second delay can change everything. 2 seconds to breathe. 2 seconds to unclench the jaw. 2 seconds to ask, what's the best move here? That question alone upgrades you. What's the best move? Not how do I feel, not how do I look, but what serves me long-term. Reaction is short-term relief. Response is a long-term advantage. Say it again. Reaction is short-term relief. Response is a long-term advantage. This is where most people fail. They chase emotional relief. They want the pressure gone now. The discomfort is gone now. The tension is released now. So they react. They speak. They send. They quit. They explode. Relief achieved. Damage delayed. And later they pay. In regret. In lost trust. In missed opportunity. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let me give you concrete rules. Rule 1. Never respond emotionally in real time. Not emails. Not messages. Not confrontations. If it triggers you, delay. Minutes. Hours. Sometimes days. Delay cools emotion. Clarity returns. And when clarity returns, response becomes obvious. Rule 2. If you feel urgency, slow down. Urgency is almost always emotional. True priorities don't scream. They wait. Rule 3. Lower your voice when others raise theirs. This is not weakness. This is dominance. People mirror energy. Calm energy forces others to adjust or reveal themselves. Either outcome benefits you. Pause is power. Delay is dominance. Rule 4. You don't owe immediate answers. You don't need their permission to think. Let me get back to you is a power phrase. Use it. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people will hate your pause because your pause removes their control. They want reaction. They want drama. They want emotional access. Response denies them that. And people who thrive on chaos feel threatened by calm. That's not your problem. That's proof you're changing. You have a choice. You can be predictable and reactive, or you can be composed and strategic. One keeps you busy. The other moves you forward. Now listen carefully. Response does not mean inaction. Response means chosen action.
Sometimes response is silence. Sometimes response is firmness. Sometimes response is walking away. But it's always intentional. Reaction is automatic obedience. Response is self-command. That's the heart of emotional self-mastery. You command yourself. Not the moment, not the emotion, not the other person. You. That's the key. Here's a mental shift that will change everything. Instead of asking, how do I respond to this? Ask, who do I want to be in this moment? Reactive people ask, what should I say? Disciplined people ask, what outcome do I want? Outcomes require patience. Patience is strength, and strength is quiet. Let me say this clearly. The person who reacts first loses leverage. In negotiations, in relationships, in conflict. Always. Delay forces others to reveal more, say more, expose intentions. Reaction shuts that down. Silence lets the truth surface. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need to fill the space. Now, let's talk about identity. If you see yourself as someone who speaks their mind, you will react. If you see yourself as someone who stays in control, you will respond. Identity drives behavior. Change the identity. I am calm under pressure. I don't rush decisions. I pause before I act. Repeat it until it becomes automatic. Automatic discipline beats emotional reflex. Every time. And here's the final truth of this chapter. Reaction is easy. Anyone can react. Animals react. Children react. Crowds react. Response is rare. Response requires strength. And strength is built, not assumed. Pause is power. Delay is dominance. You have a choice. Every moment gives you that choice. And the more you choose response over reaction, the more control you gain. Control over outcomes, control over reputation, control over yourself. That's emotional self-mastery. You've learned to pause. You've learned to delay. Now it's time to understand the price of failing to do so. Because every impulse you obey sends you a bill. And that bill always arrives later. You've mastered reaction versus response. Now let's expose the real cost.
Chapter 3. The cost of emotional impulses is always paid later. Every emotional impulse makes you an offer. It promises relief. It promises release. It promises comfort right now. But it never tells you the price. That's the trap. Emotional impulses never ask for payment up front. They defer the cost. And deferred costs are the most dangerous kind. Short relief creates long-term damage. That's the key. Every time you obey an emotional impulse, you are taking out a loan against your future, and the interest rate is brutal. Regret, reputation damage, lost trust, missed opportunity. You may not pay today, but you will pay, always. This is the law most people refuse to learn. Let's make it clear. There is no such thing as a free emotional reaction. There is no such thing as a harmless impulse. Every impulse has consequences. You have a choice. You can pay now with discipline, or you can pay later with pain. Most people choose later, because later feels invisible. That's the key. Let's start with one of the most common forms of self-sabotage, rage texting. You're upset, triggered, angry. Your phone is in your hand, and suddenly typing feels like justice. You send the message. You say the thing. You hit send. And for 10 seconds, you feel relief. 10 seconds. Then the cost begins. You reread it. You regret the tone. You realize you revealed too much. You gave away leverage. And now the situation is worse than before. That's the pattern. Short relief creates long-term damage.
Rage texting doesn't fix problems. It escalates them. It turns temporary emotion into a permanent record. And the worst part? You didn't need to send it. You have a choice. That's the key. If something makes you emotional,
You do not respond digitally. That is a rule. Emotion plus technology equals exposure. Emails, texts, messages, they remember everything. Your emotional state will pass. Your words will not. It's not about expression. It's about discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about expression. It's about discipline. Now let's talk about emotional spending. This one destroys lives quietly. You feel stressed, underappreciated, overworked, and spending feels like relief. You buy something, you upgrade, you splurge, and for a moment you feel better. Short relief. Then the bill arrives. Credit card debt, financial pressure, more stress. The thing didn't fix the feeling. It distracted you from it, and now the feeling is back, with interest. Short relief creates long-term damage. Emotional spending is not about money. It's about avoidance. Avoiding discomfort. Avoiding boredom. Avoiding dissatisfaction. Discipline says, sit with the discomfort. Impulse says, escape it. Escape always costs more. That's the key. Let's talk about quitting too early. This one hurts the most. You start something meaningful, a job, a business, a relationship, a habit, and then it gets uncomfortable. You feel frustration, doubt, resistance, and the impulse whispers, this isn't right for you. You deserve better. You shouldn't feel this way. So you quit. Relief. The pressure is gone. The discomfort stops. For now. Months later, you see someone else succeed where you stopped, and the regret hits. Not loud. Quiet. The thought, I could have handled that. That's the payment. Short relief creates long-term damage. Most people don't fail because they chose wrong. They fail because they quit emotionally. You don't need their permission to stay. You don't need comfort to continue. You have a choice. That's the key. Now listen carefully. Emotional impulses always feel urgent.
They say, do something now. Fix this now. End this now. Urgency is how impulses win. Discipline removes urgency. Discipline says, not yet. Let's wait. Let's think. Delay exposes the true cost. That's why delay is dangerous to impulse and powerful for you. Short relief creates long-term damage. Here's a hard truth. Most regrets are not caused by bad intentions. They're caused by unexamined impulses. People don't regret being patient. They regret being impulsive. They regret what they said in anger, what they bought in stress, what they quit in frustration, not what they paused on. That's the key. Let's talk about reputation. Reputation is built slowly, destroyed quickly. One emotional outburst can erase years of consistency. One impulsive decision can change how people see you permanently. And the worst part? You might be right and still lose. Because emotional behavior overshadows logic. People remember how you made them feel, not how correct you were. That's not fair, but it's real. It's not about fairness. It's about discipline. Now let's shift perspective. Impulse is about now. Discipline is about later. Impulse asks, how do I feel? Discipline asks, what does this cost? Impulse is selfish with time. Discipline is strategic with energy. Every disciplined pause is a future win. Every impulsive action is a future problem. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a rule you must adopt. If an action gives immediate relief, question it. Relief is suspicious. Growth rarely feels relieving at first. Relief often means avoidance. Avoidance compounds problems. Short relief creates long-term damage. Another rule. Never make permanent decisions in temporary emotional states. Never. Not quitting, not ending relationships, not burning bridges. Emotions fluctuate. Consequences don't. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Emotion is the weather. Character is climate. Don't build your life around today's storm. Now let's talk about a missed opportunity. This is the silent cost. You react emotionally, and an opportunity disappears. You decline because you're scared. You lash out and lose trust. You rush and choose wrong. And no one tells you what you missed.
You just feel stuck later. Most people don't know which door their impulse closed. That's the tragedy. Short relief creates long-term damage. The disciplined person accepts short-term discomfort to protect long-term opportunity. That's maturity. That's self-mastery. That's the key. Here's the transformation. You stop asking, what do I want to do? And start asking, what does my future self need me to do? Future you pays the bill.
Respect them. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need to justify delay. Delay is not indecision. Delay is evaluation, and evaluation saves lives. Now let me be direct. If you keep obeying impulses, your life will feel chaotic, even if you work hard. Because effort without discipline creates exhaustion, not progress. It's not about effort, it's about control. Say it again. It's not about effort, it's about control. So what do? You create friction between impulse and action. Friction saves you. You wait 24 hours before big decisions. You write instead of sending. You walk instead of responding. You let emotion pass before acting. Emotion always passes. Consequences don't. Short relief creates long-term damage. And here's the final truth of this chapter. Emotional impulses are expensive. Discipline is cheaper. Pay with patience now, or pay with regret later. You have a choice. That's the key. You've now seen the cost. You understand the bill. Next, you must learn where real control is built. Not in the moment itself, but in the space before it. You've learned that impulses charge interest. Now it's time to master the moment before action.
Chapter 4. Master the gap between trigger and action. Everything changes in the gap. Not in the trigger, not in the emotion, not in the situation, in the gap. The small space between what happens to you and what you do next. That space is invisible to most people, but it decides everything. The gap is where leaders are born. That's the key. Most people believe power is about force, about confidence, about charisma. It's not. Power is about control, and control is built in milliseconds. The moment something triggers you, a comment, a look, a message, a setback, your body reacts before your mind. Heart rate rises, breathing shortens, muscles tense. That is automatic. You don't control the trigger. You don't control the initial feeling, but you do control what happens next. You have a choice. That choice lives in the gap. The problem is this: most people don't even know the gap exists. They think emotion equals action. I felt it, so I did it. I was angry, so I spoke. I was scared, so I avoided. No, that's obedience, and obedience kills authority. The gap is where leaders are born. Say it again. The gap is where leaders are born. Let's slow this down. A trigger hits. Anger, fear, embarrassment, pressure. The body reacts. This is not failure. This is biology. The mistake is what comes next. Most people collapse the gap to zero. Trigger, action, no pause, no awareness, no control. And then they wonder why their life feels reactive. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your emotional gap. That's the key. Now listen carefully. The gap can be trained, just like a muscle. At first, it's weak, small, hard to find. But with repetition, it grows. And as it grows, your power grows. Let's talk tools, not theory. Tools. First tool, breathing. Breathing is not about relaxation. It's about command. When emotion spikes, breathing is the fastest way to regain authority over your nervous system. Short breath equals panic. Deep breath equals control. Here's the rule. When triggered, breathe slower than you want to. In through the nose, 4 seconds. Hold, 2 seconds. Out through the mouth, 6 seconds.
That exhale is dominance. It tells your body, I'm in charge. Do it once and you interrupt the reaction. Do it twice and the gap opens. That's the key. Most people breathe shallow and fast when emotional. That fuels reaction. Slow breathing starves emotion. You don't need their permission to pause and breathe. Second tool, physical stillness. Emotion wants movement, pacing, gesturing, typing, talking. Movement releases energy. Stillness contains it. Stillness feels uncomfortable because it denies impulse its outlet. That discomfort is power. When triggered, reduce movement.
Unclench your jaw. Lower your shoulders. Plant your feet. Stillness tells your brain there is no emergency. The calmer your body, the clearer your thinking. The gap widens. The gap is where leaders are born. Third tool, internal narration. This is critical. Emotion feels overwhelming when it's vague. Naming it shrinks it. When triggered, narrate internally. This is anger. This is fear. This is ego. That's it. No judgment, no story. Labeling turns emotion into an object instead of a commander. You are no longer inside it. You are observing it. Observation creates separation. Separation creates control. That's the key. Now let's combine the tools. Trigger hits. You breathe. You go still. You label. In less than 10 seconds, the gap appears. And inside that gap, you choose. You have a choice. Most people never practice this, so when pressure arrives, they default to reaction. You are training a different response. This is emotional self-mastery. Now let's talk about why this matters. Because every major mistake happens when the gap is closed. Every regret, every outburst, every bad decision. No gap. The strongest people you know are not emotionless. They are slow. Slow to speak, slow to react, slow to commit. Speed is impressive. Slowness is powerful. That's the key. Let's apply this to real situations. Workplace pressure. Your boss criticizes you unexpectedly. Trigger.
Old pattern, defend immediately. New pattern, breathe. Still, label. You don't rush to explain, you don't interrupt. You let the moment breathe. Then you respond calmly or ask for time. Authority restored. Family conflict. Someone pushes an old button. Trigger. Old pattern, explode or shut down. New pattern, pause. You say less. You slow down. The dynamic changes because you changed. The gap broke the pattern. High-stakes decisions. Fear spikes. Old pattern, avoid or rush. New pattern, delay. You give yourself space. Decisions made in the gap are cleaner. That's the key. Here's a rule that will protect your life. If you can't find the gap, don't act. No gap means no clarity. Wait until the gap appears. Emotion fades. Perspective returns. You don't need their permission to wait. Waiting is not weakness. Waiting is discipline. Say it clearly. It's not about speed. It's about discipline. Now let's talk about identity again. You are becoming someone who lives in the gap, someone who does not collapse under pressure, someone who does not react on impulse. This is rare. Most people are predictable. They react the same way every time. Predictability is exploitable. The unpredictable person is the one who pauses, the one who stays calm, the one who chooses. The gap is where leaders are born. Here's the uncomfortable part. People may try harder to provoke you because your calm denies them emotional control. That's fine. Let them try. Your job is not to win emotionally. Your job is to remain sovereign.
Sovereignty means self-rule. No emotion rules you. No person controls your reactions. You do. That's the key. Now, let me be blunt. If you don't master the gap, nothing else in this book matters. Techniques won't save you. Knowledge won't save you, because emotion will hijack everything. Master the gap, and everything changes. Your decisions improve. Your relationships stabilize. Your reputation strengthens. You move from reactive to deliberate, from chaotic to composed, from emotional to dangerous, in the best sense. The gap is where leaders are born. One last instruction: practice the gap daily, not only in big moments, in traffic, in small annoyances, in minor stress. Small reps build big control. By the time the big moment arrives, the gap will be there automatically. You have a choice. That's the key. You've learned how to create space, how to breathe, how to still your body, how to narrate internally. You now know where power lives. But there's another threat to emotional mastery, a hidden addiction, one that destroys stability quietly. You mastered the gap. Now, let's expose the trap that pulls people back into emotional chaos.
Chapter 5. Stop needing validation to feel stable. If your emotions depend on other people, you are not in control. They are. That's the truth most people avoid. The calmest person needs nothing. That's the key. Validation is one of the most powerful emotional drugs on earth. Approval, likes, praise, attention, agreement. It feels good, but anything that feels good and controls your behavior eventually owns you. Needing validation makes your emotional state fragile. One compliment lifts you, one criticism crushes you. That is not confidence. That is dependency. And dependency destroys emotional self-mastery. You have a choice. You can be internally anchored or externally controlled. Most people choose control without realizing it. They say, "I don't care what people think." Then they change their behavior the moment approval disappears. That's the key. Let's be clear. Wanting respect is normal. Needing validation is dangerous. Wanting feedback is healthy. Needing approval is unstable. It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. Say it again. It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. Let's start with the most obvious example. Social media, a global validation machine. You post, you wait, you check. Likes become worth. Comments become mood. Upward spike, downward crash. This is not harmless. It trains your nervous system to outsource emotional stability. You feel good when others approve. You feel anxious when they don't.
And slowly, without noticing, you stop acting from principle and start acting for reaction. That's the trap. The calmest person needs nothing. People who need validation are easy to manipulate. Praise them, they comply. Ignore them, they spiral. Criticize them, and they react. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need to perform. Here's the hard truth. If praise motivates you more than purpose, you will eventually betray yourself. Because praise changes. Algorithms change. People change. Attention moves on. And when it does, the emotionally dependent person collapses. That's the cost. Now let's talk about approval seeking. This one hides well. You say yes when you want to say no. You explain when you don't need to. You justify your decisions. Why? Because you want to be liked, understood, accepted. This feels polite, but it's expensive. Every unnecessary explanation leaks power. Every forced yes builds resentment. And resentment always comes back as anger, either at others or at yourself. Short relief creates long-term damage. Approval-seeking creates emotional volatility because your inner state depends on external response. You have a choice. You can disappoint people now or disappoint yourself later. That's the key. Now, let's talk about people-pleasing. People-pleasing is fear disguised as kindness, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. So you manage others' emotions instead of mastering your own. You're smooth, you soften, you sacrifice, until one day you snap. Because suppression is not mastery. Suppression explodes eventually. The calmest person needs nothing.
They don't need to be liked. They don't need to be agreed with. They don't need to be applauded. They need alignment. Alignment with values, alignment with direction, alignment with self-respect. That's discipline. It's not about being cold, it's about being stable. Say it clearly, it's not about being cold, it's about being stable. Now let's expose the real danger. When you need validation, you lose the ability to think clearly, because decisions become emotional calculations. How will this look? What will they say? Will they approve? That noise clouds judgment. The strongest decisions are made quietly, without applause, without permission. You don't need their permission. That's the key. Let me give you a powerful reframe. Validation is optional. Self-respect is not. If a decision earns approval but costs self-respect, it's a bad deal. If a decision costs approval but strengthens self-respect, it's a good deal. Always. Now here are behavioral rules. Rule 1. Stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. Strong people state, weak people justify. You don't owe a story for every decision. No is a complete sentence. Rule 2. Delay seeking feedback. Don't immediately look for reaction after action. Do the work, let it stand. Silence builds internal stability. Rule 3. Notice when your mood changes based on response. That's awareness. When likes drop and mood drops, you've identified dependency. Awareness breaks patterns. That's the key. Rule 4. Practice emotional independence daily. Do things that earn no applause.
Train when no one watches. Work without announcing. Improve quietly. This builds internal grounding. The calmest person needs nothing. Now let's address the fear. What if people don't like me? They won't. Not everyone. That's reality. Trying to be liked by everyone guarantees being respected by no one. Respect comes from consistency, not approval. People trust those who don't chase reaction because they feel solid, and solidity attracts. Ironically, the less you seek validation, the more you receive genuine respect. That's the paradox. That's the key. Now listen carefully. Emotional self-mastery requires independence. Not isolation, independence. You can care without depending. You can listen without obeying. You can connect without collapsing. This is maturity. If someone's silence destabilizes you, they have power over you. If someone's criticism controls you, they own you. Take that power back. You have a choice. Choose internal stability. Choose discipline over approval. Choose alignment over applause. The calmest person needs nothing. Say it again. The calmest person needs nothing. You are not here to perform. You are here to direct your life. And directors don't look to the audience for permission mid-scene. They decide. You've now removed another chain. You no longer obey impulses. You no longer collapse without the gap. You no longer outsource your worth.
you are becoming internally anchored. But there is one more skill that multiplies emotional mastery in the real world. Because calm is not passive. Calm is a weapon, and it terrifies chaos. You've stopped needing validation. Now, let's learn how to use calm deliberately.
Chapter 6. Calm is a weapon in a chaotic world. Calm is not weakness. Calm is control. And control is power. That's the key. In a world addicted to noise, emotion, outrage, and urgency, the calm person becomes dangerous. Not loud, not aggressive, not reactive. Dangerous because they cannot be manipulated. Chaos feeds on emotion. Starve it. Say it again. Chaos feeds on emotion. Starve it. Most people believe power comes from intensity, from force, from dominance, from pressure. That belief is outdated. In reality, chaos is loud. Emotion is loud. Weakness is loud. Calm is quiet, and quiet commands the room. You have a choice. You can match chaos, or you can control it. Only one of those leads to leverage. Let's make this clear. Manipulation only works on emotional people. Intimidation only works on reactive people. Pressure only works on those who rush. Calm disarms all three. That's the key. Let's start with negotiation. Whether it's business, salary, deals, or boundaries, one side wants urgency. They want speed. They want a reaction. Why? Because urgency shuts down thinking. They push deadlines. They raise their voices. They imply consequences. And most people fold because emotion spikes. Calm refuses the frame. Calm slows the pace. Calm listens longer than expected, speaks less than expected. Silence stretches, and suddenly the other side fills the gap. They explain, they justify, they reveal. The calm person gains information. Information is power. Chaos feeds on emotion. Starve it. In negotiation, the calmest person usually wins, not because they talk more, but because they rush less. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need to accept urgency. Urgency is a tactic. Calm is a counter. That's the key. Now let's talk about arguments. Arguments are emotional storms. They thrive on escalation, raised voices, sharp words, fast replies. Reaction fuels them. Calm kills them.
When someone attacks emotionally, they expect resistance, defense, anger, justification. That's fuel. Calm offers none. Calm says less. Calm slows down. Calm refuses to match tone. This confuses emotional people because they want a fight. And when you don't give them one, they lose control. Chaos feeds on emotion. Starve it. Lower your voice. Slow your speech. Take longer pauses. This shifts the power dynamic instantly. People cannot sustain anger alone. They need participation. Calm denies them that. That's dominance. It's not about winning arguments. It's about ending chaos. Say it clearly. It's not about winning arguments. It's about discipline. Now let's talk about crisis leadership. This is where calm separates leaders from followers. When pressure hits, deadlines, failure, emergencies, people look around, not for the smartest person, for the calmest. Because calm signals safety. Safety restores thinking. Panic spreads faster than solutions, but calm spreads faster than panic. One steady presence can stabilize an entire room. That's not personality, that's emotional mastery. In crisis, the calm leader asks questions. They slow decisions. They prioritize clearly. Emotional leaders rush. They react. They blame.
They confuse urgency with effectiveness. Chaos feeds on emotion. Starve it. If you want influence, master calm under pressure. That's the key. Now let's talk about intimidation. Some people try to control through volume, through anger, through aggression, through presence. This only works if you react, if you shrink, if you rush, if you explain. Calm refuses submission. Calm doesn't argue, it doesn't appease, it observes. And observation unnerves aggressors, because intimidation depends on emotional response. No response, no power. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need to prove strength. Your calm proves it for you. That's the key. Here's a powerful truth. The person who controls the emotional temperature controls the interaction. If you heat it up, chaos grows. If you cool it down, chaos dies. You are the thermostat. Set it deliberately. Now let's get practical. How do you weaponize calm?
First, slow everything down. Slow speech, slow movement, slow decisions. Speed is emotional. Slowness is strategic. When others rush, you slow. That contrast creates authority. Second, use silence intentionally. Silence is not awkward. Silence is pressure. Most people rush to fill it. Let them. Information leaks in silence. Third, ask fewer, better questions. Questions shift focus. They move energy away from emotion and toward thinking. What's the real concern here? What outcome are we aiming for? Questions calm the room. Fourth, detach from winning. If you need to win emotionally, you've already lost control. Calm doesn't need victory. It needs clarity. The calmest person needs nothing. That's the key. Now listen carefully. Calm is not passive. Calm is deliberate restraint. It's choosing not to react even when you could. That restraint is felt. People sense it. They adjust. They soften. They slow. They reconsider. Because calm creates gravity. Now let's address the fear. What if they think I'm weak? They won't. Emotionally immature people mistake calm for weakness. But they are not the ones who matter. Decision makers respect composure. Leaders trust steadiness. Calm builds long-term credibility. Reaction burns it. It's not about being liked. It's about being effective. That's the key. Here's another truth. Chaos will test your calm repeatedly because chaos hates boundaries.
When you stay calm, people may push harder, raise your voices more, apply pressure again. This is a test. Do not change. The moment you react, chaos wins. Starve it. Chaos feeds on emotion. Starve it. Eventually, chaos collapses because it has no fuel. And when it collapses, you remain standing. That's power. That's emotional self-mastery in action. Now, bring this inward. Internal chaos works the same way. Anxiety, overthinking, self-doubt, they feed on emotional engagement. Calm attention starves them. You don't fight anxiety. You don't argue with fear. You observe calmly, and it loses strength. The calmest person needs nothing, not reassurance, not certainty, not control, just presence. That's the key. Now, let me be blunt. If you cannot stay calm, you will always be managed by someone who can. Calm people rise. Reactive people get used. This is not fair, but it is real. So choose. You have a choice. React and release, or remain calm and dominate outcomes. Calm is not your default, it's your discipline.
And discipline is trained. Every time you choose calm, you strengthen it. Every time you react, you weaken it. Choose wisely. You don't need their permission. You've now learned how calm disarms chaos, how composure creates leverage, how silence, slowness, and steadiness turn pressure into advantage. But calm alone is not enough, because discipline must be trained before pressure arrives. You cannot improvise emotional control in the moment. You must build it in advance. You've learned how to wield calm. Now it's time to train it.
Chapter 7. Discipline is emotional training, not willpower. Let's destroy a myth. Willpower is not strength. Willpower is temporary. Willpower is unreliable. And willpower will fail you at the exact moment you need it most. That's the key. Most people believe discipline means trying harder. They believe control comes from motivation. They believe success depends on how badly you want something. That belief keeps them stuck, because emotion fades, energy dips, motivation disappears. Pressure arrives unannounced, and when it does, willpower collapses. You don't rise to the level of motivation, you fall to the level of training. Say it again. You fall to the level of training. That's the key. Discipline is not force. Discipline is conditioning. Discipline is emotional training. Discipline is teaching your nervous system how to respond before pressure arrives. Train the response before the pressure arrives. That sentence matters. Train the response before the pressure arrives. Because when pressure hits, you don't decide how you'll react. You reveal what you've practiced. You have a choice. Keep relying on willpower or build systems that make willpower irrelevant. Only one works long-term. Let's get honest. Willpower depends on mood. Systems don't care about mood. Willpower depends on energy. Systems run on structure. Willpower requires constant effort. Systems remove decision-making, and decision-making is emotional. That's the key. Every time you decide whether to act, you introduce emotion. Emotion creates friction. Friction creates delay. Delay creates failure. Discipline removes choice.
Discipline says, this is what happens no matter how I feel. That's emotional training. It's not about motivation, it's about repetition. Now, let's break this down practically. Your emotions are trainable. Fear, anger, anxiety, procrastination. These are learned responses, and anything learned can be retrained, but not through thinking, through repetition. Train the response before the pressure arrives. That's the key. Let's talk about routines. Routines are emotional shortcuts. They bypass hesitation. They bypass debate. They bypass resistance. When a behavior is automatic, emotion has no vote. That's power. Most people wait to feel ready. Disciplined people act when the clock says so, not when the mood agrees. That's the difference. You don't need their permission to build routines. You don't need permission from your emotions either. Emotions are signals, not commands. Discipline decides. Now let's talk about rules. Rules simplify life. Rules remove negotiation. Rules end inner arguments. I don't check my phone before work. That's a rule. I train even when tired. That's a rule. I pause before responding emotionally. That's a rule. Rules create predictability. Predictability creates calm. Calm creates consistency. Consistency creates results. That's the key. Without rules, every day becomes a debate, and debates drain energy. Emotion wins debates. Discipline avoids them. It's not about laziness, it's about structure.
Now let's talk about emotional conditioning. This is where real transformation happens. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you train calm. Every time you act despite discomfort, you train resilience. Every time you delay gratification, you train self-control. These are emotional muscles. They grow with repetition, not insight, not motivation, repetition. Train the response before the pressure arrives. That's the key. Let's use fear as an example. Fear doesn't disappear through thinking. Fear shrinks through exposure. Small, repeated exposure, daily discomfort, controlled stress. This trains your nervous system. It learns, I can handle this, and fear loses authority. Same with procrastination. You don't overcome procrastination by understanding it. You overcome it by starting anyway. 5 minutes, no negotiation. Action trains identity. Identity reshapes emotion. That's the key. Now, listen carefully. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is protection. It protects you from emotional chaos, from impulse decisions, from self-betrayal. Every disciplined act is a vote for stability. Every undisciplined act strengthens volatility. You have a choice. Strengthen the emotional patterns you want or reinforce the ones that keep controlling you. Now let's talk about habits. Habits are an emotional autopilot. They determine your reactions before thought gets involved. If your habits are weak, your emotions run your life. If your habits are strong, your emotions follow structure. That's power. Habits are built through repetition and timing. Same cue, same action, same reward. Keep it boring. Boring is effective. Emotion wants novelty. Discipline wants reliability. That's the key. Now let's address resistance. Resistance shows up when habits are new. This is where people quit. They say, it doesn't feel natural. Of course it doesn't. You're retraining decades of emotional wiring. Discomfort is proof of progress. If it feels uncomfortable, it means old patterns are breaking. Stay consistent. Repetition beats resistance. Train the response before the pressure arrives. Now let's talk about discipline under pressure. This is where training reveals itself. When tired, when stressed, when criticized, your response shows your level. You don't suddenly become disciplined. You show what you've rehearsed. That's why daily structure matters. Small actions train big reactions. Morning routines train crisis behavior. Boundaries train confidence. Silence trains restraint. Discipline is practiced when stakes are low, so it holds when stakes are high. That's the key. Now let's talk about emotional rules. Rules for anger, rules for fear, rules for anxiety. Example, when I feel angry, I pause for 10 seconds. When I feel anxious, I breathe slowly before acting. When I feel defensive, I ask one clarifying question. These rules interrupt automatic reactions. Interruption creates choice. Choice creates control. You have a choice, but only if you've trained it. Without training, emotion chooses for you. That's the key. Now let's get blunt. If your life feels chaotic, your emotional training is weak. Same cue, same action, same reward. Keep it boring. Boring is effective. Emotion wants novelty. Discipline wants reliability. That's the key. Now let's address resistance. Resistance shows up when habits are new. This is where people quit. They say, it doesn't feel natural. Of course it doesn't. You're retraining decades of emotional wiring. Discomfort is proof of progress. If it feels uncomfortable, it means old patterns are breaking. Stay consistent. Repetition beats resistance. Train the response before the pressure arrives. Now let's talk about discipline under pressure. This is where training reveals itself. When tired, when stressed, when criticized, your response shows your level. You don't suddenly become disciplined. You show what you've rehearsed. That's why daily structure matters. Small actions train big reactions. Morning routines train crisis behavior. Boundaries train confidence. Silence trains restraint. Discipline is practiced when stakes are low, so it holds when stakes are high. That's the key. Now let's talk about emotional rules. Rules for anger, rules for fear, rules for anxiety. Example, when I feel angry, I pause for 10 seconds. When I feel anxious, I breathe slowly before acting. When I feel defensive, I ask one clarifying question. These rules interrupt automatic reactions. Interruption creates choice. Choice creates control. You have a choice, but only if you've trained it. Without training, emotion chooses for you. That's the key. Now let's get blunt. If your life feels chaotic, your emotional training is weak.
Chapter 8. Detach from outcomes to think clearly. Let's face a brutal truth. Most people are not emotionally free. They are hostage to outcomes. Results. Results they want, results they fear, results they obsess over. And that obsession clouds thinking. Clarity comes from detachment. Say it again. Clarity comes from detachment. Most people make decisions emotionally. They make career moves because they want approval. They make investments because they fear loss. They make relationship choices because they want control. Every decision is fueled by attachment. Attachment kills clarity. Attachment amplifies fear. Attachment hijacks judgment. You have a choice. Attach and react. Detach and decide. That's the key. Let's be honest. When you are attached to an outcome, you are not thinking. You are hoping. You are begging. You are bargaining. And hope is a weak foundation. Begging is weak leverage. Bargaining is weak thinking. Clarity comes from detachment. This is the skill that separates leaders from followers. Leaders detach. Followers react. Let's break it down with real examples. Relationships. Most people act out of attachment. They argue because they want to be right. They cling because they fear loss. They make choices based on how others will respond. That is weakness. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. Detachment means your peace does not depend on approval. Detachment means you see clearly what is working, what is not, and act strategically. Clarity comes from detachment. Career moves. Most people accept promotions they hate. Most people take jobs they despise. Most people make decisions to impress others or avoid failure. Attachment drives this behavior. Fear of losing, fear of being judged, fear of missing out. All emotional, all clouded. Detachment allows calculation. Detachment allows rational assessment. Detachment allows decisive action. Clarity comes from detachment. Money decisions. Most people buy impulsively. Most people invest emotionally. Most people chase trends because they are afraid of regret. Attachment clouds risk evaluation. Attachment fuels panic. Attachment destroys strategy. Detach from the outcome. Focus on the process. Focus on the principles. Clarity comes from detachment. Now, here's the hard truth. Detachment is not natural. Your brain is wired to crave certainty. Your emotions are wired to attach. That's why detachment is a discipline. That's why it requires practice. That's why most people fail. You have a choice. Stay attached and stay reactive. Or detach and gain clarity. That's the key. Let's talk about practical ways to detach. Step 1.
Separate the action from the result. Decide what you will do regardless of the outcome. I will work hard. I will speak honestly. I will create value. Results are external. Control what you can control. Detach from the rest. Step 2. Pause before responding. Don't react instantly. Step back. Breathe. Observe. Emotional attachment collapses in the pause. Clarity appears. Step 3. Remove personal stakes from external validation. Feedback is information, not judgment, not worth, not identity. Clarity comes from detachment. Step 4. Practice outcome-neutral experimentation. Try things without needing a particular result. Experiment, learn, adjust. When you detach from the expected, fear loses power. Insight grows. Decisions improve. Step 5. Build routines that enforce detachment. Ritualize reflection. Ritualize delayed action. Ritualize evaluation separate from emotion. These routines teach the nervous system to stay calm, to stay objective, to think clearly. Clarity comes from detachment. Now let's address the fear that attachment creates. Fear spikes when the future feels uncertain. Fear spikes when stakes feel personal. Detachment does not remove risk. It removes panic. It removes overreaction. It removes wasted energy. Detach and fear loses control. Detach and you act strategically. Detach and the world becomes predictable. Detach and outcomes are tools, not masters. Clarity comes from detachment. Here's an advanced principle. Attachment creates bias. You focus only on what you want to happen. You ignore signals. You misread reality. Detach and the world speaks clearly. Detach and the data is obvious. Detach and patterns emerge. Your brain no longer lies to protect your desires. Your perception becomes accurate. Your decisions become precise. Clarity comes from detachment. Now let's combine detachment with all you've learned so far.
You've mastered the gap between trigger and action. You've trained discipline through repetition. You've stopped needing validation. You've wielded calm as a weapon. Detachment is the final layer. Detach from outcomes. Detach from praise. Detach from fear. Detach from the need to be right. Detach from the need to control. Detach from the illusion that peace depends on what others do. And suddenly, your mind operates differently. Your body operates differently. Your decisions operate differently. Clarity comes from detachment. Now let's get practical in high-stakes moments. Decision-making under pressure. Detach from fear of failure. Detach from fear of judgment. Detach from hope or expectation. Ask yourself, what is my principle here? What is my action regardless of result? Decide, act, observe, adjust. Do not chase outcomes emotionally. Do not seek reward. Do not avoid loss. Action becomes clean. The decision becomes precise. Mind becomes still. Clarity comes from detachment. Relationship conflicts. Detach from needing to be understood. Detach from needing agreement. Detach from needing approval. Observe. Respond strategically. Act calmly. Your choices are no longer driven by reaction. Your peace is no longer negotiable. Clarity comes from detachment. Financial or career risks. Detach from outcome obsession. Detach from panic.
Detach from winning or losing. Focus on principles. Focus on process. Focus on consistent action. Clarity comes from detachment. Now here's the final truth. Detachment is not avoidance. Detachment is not apathy. Detachment is not passivity. Detachment is control. Detachment is precision. Detachment is sovereignty. Clarity comes from detachment. Repeat it in your mind. Speak it aloud if necessary. Clarity comes from detachment. Clarity comes from detachment. Clarity comes from detachment. When you operate like this, nothing can manipulate you. Nothing can provoke you. Nothing can hijack your decisions. Attachment enslaves. Detachment liberates. You have a choice. Attach and react. Detach and think clearly. That's the key. You've now trained the gap. You've mastered discipline. You've wielded calm. You've detached from outcomes. You are now ready to elevate focus, because clarity is only useful when it is applied to what matters.
Chapter 9. Emotional strength is built through discomfort. Discomfort is not the enemy. It is the gym, the place where strength is forged. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Say it again. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Most people run from discomfort. They scroll, they distract, they're numb, they justify. And every time they do, they weaken. They weaken their emotional spine. They weaken their patience. They weaken their control. You have a choice. Avoid discomfort and remain weak. Embrace it and grow stronger. That's the key. Let's be blunt. Your emotions are muscles. Anger, fear, anxiety, desire, urgency. They all have strength. And just like muscles, they must be trained. But not by avoiding stress, not by indulging impulses, not by giving in to comfort. They are trained through controlled, deliberate discomfort. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Let's talk about real-world examples. Silence. Most people avoid silence. They fill it with noise, talking, with reaction, with judgment. Silence forces you to feel, to observe, to face your impulses. Do not run from it. Sit in it. Notice the urge to fill it. Resist the urge. Every time you do this, your emotional resilience grows. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Delayed gratification. Most people chase immediate pleasure, the notification, the snack, the impulse buy, the quick reaction. This trains the nervous system to crave now, to collapse under impulse, to surrender control. Delay, wait, resist. Train your mind to operate independently of instant reward. Every time you choose process over pleasure, you build emotional strength. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Saying no. Most people say yes to avoid conflict. They say yes to gain approval. They say yes because it feels safer. Every unnecessary yes weakens your spine. Every unearned concession erodes discipline. Learn to say no. Learn to pause before agreeing. Learn to prioritize principle over comfort. Every no strengthens your emotional backbone. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Staying calm when provoked. Most people explode. They react instantly. They justify. They attack. Every reaction strengthens chaos in your nervous system. Every uncontrolled response trains your mind to surrender to emotion. Stay calm. Pause. Observe. Respond deliberately. Every time you do this, you create mastery over the most powerful force in the universe, your own mind.
Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Now let's talk about daily habits. Seek micro-discomfort every day. Wake up earlier than you want. Exercise when you feel lazy. Work when you feel tired. Speak truth when it feels risky.
Every small act of discomfort compounds over time. It trains your nervous system to tolerate pressure. It trains your emotions to follow discipline. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Here's the truth most people refuse to face. Comfort is a prison. It feels safe. It feels easy. It feels natural. But it builds nothing but weakness. The strongest people in the world embrace discomfort. The strongest minds endure boredom, rejection, uncertainty. The strongest hearts face fear without flinching. The strongest leaders act in silence when no one is watching. You have a choice. Stay comfortable and stay weak. Embrace discomfort and grow unshakable. That's the key. Now let's explore emotional conditioning through discomfort. Every emotional trigger you face is a training opportunity. Someone insults you. Pause. Observe. Do not react. Someone criticizes you. Listen. Breathe. Respond deliberately. Someone tests your patience. Hold your ground. Stay calm. Every controlled reaction strengthens your emotional muscles. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Here's a principle few understand. Your mind fears discomfort more than it fears failure. Fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of uncertainty. All of these are mental resistances. All of these are avoidable. All of these can be trained. Expose yourself deliberately. Face small discomforts daily. Grow immunity to emotional stress. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Let's talk about identity. Who you are is built in discomfort. Every time you resist impulse, every time you pause before reacting, every time you endure pressure without collapsing, you are proving something to yourself. You are training identity. You are training courage. You are training emotional sovereignty. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery.
Now let's address fear directly. Most people avoid fear because it is unpleasant. Fear tells you to run, to avoid, to hide. But the person who confronts fear grows. The person who faces anxiety, uncertainty, or social risk strengthens resilience. The person who endures pain, criticism, or delay develops mastery. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Now let's combine all you've learned. You've paused the gap between trigger and action. You've trained discipline through repetition. You've wielded calm as a weapon. You've detached from outcomes. Now you embrace discomfort deliberately. Every day, every interaction, every decision. This is the crucible where emotional strength is forged. Do not run. Do not seek comfort. Do not chase ease. Step into the gym of life. Lift emotional weights. Endure mental resistance. Train your impulses like muscles. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Repeat it in your mind. Speak it aloud. Feel it in your body. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. Discomfort is the gym for self-mastery. When you train this way, the world cannot shake you. Chaos does not disturb you. Criticism does not faze you. Pressure does not collapse you. You are forged. You are unshakable. You are in control. The weak avoid pain. The strong seek it. You have a choice. Avoid discomfort and remain reactive. Embrace discomfort and rise. That's the key. You've now learned the full architecture of emotional mastery. Pause and control the gap. Train discipline before pressure arrives. Wield calm as a weapon.
Detach from outcomes. Step into discomfort deliberately. And if you practice these principles relentlessly, you will transform.
Not tomorrow, not next week, now. You are no longer a slave to impulse. You are no longer reactive. You are no longer dependent on approval. You are the master of yourself. Now there is one final step, one final principle that turns emotional mastery into unstoppable life power.
Chapter 10. Become the person nothing can shake. Let's end with the hardest lesson. You've trained discipline. You've mastered the gap. You've wielded calm. You've detached from outcomes. You've endured discomfort. But now comes the final test: action without attachment. This is the point where theory becomes reality. Most people fail here. They act, but only with hope. They act, but only for approval. They act, but only for reward. That is weakness. True mastery is acting without clinging. It's not about what happens, it's about what you do. It's about the process, not the result. You have a choice. Cling to outcome and be reactive. Detach from outcome and act with precision. That's the key. Let's break it down. Attachment is a subtle poison. It creeps in through hope, through fear, through ego, through the need to be right, and it turns every action into anxiety. You act with tension. You act with doubt. You act with emotional chains. Detach. Let go. Act freely. Every master you admire acts this way. Every leader you respect acts this way. Every great performer, thinker, and creator acts this way. They are attached to nothing. They are free to move. They are free to respond. They are free to act perfectly in chaos. Action without attachment. Now let's talk about how to practice this. Step 1. Focus on principle, not outcome. Ask yourself, what is the right action regardless of result? Do that. Do it consistently. Do it even when uncomfortable. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need a guarantee. You don't need certainty. Principle over result. Discipline over feeling. Process over desire. That's the key. Step 2. Detach from judgment. Most people act to impress. Most people act to avoid shame. Most people act to be validated. Stop. Your action is not about them. It's not about approval. It's not about recognition. Act because it is correct. Act because it is necessary. Act because you promised yourself. You don't need their permission. Step 3. Embrace controlled risk. Every meaningful action carries uncertainty. Every transformative move carries exposure. Every opportunity requires discomfort. If you cling to safety, you remain small. You remain reactive. You remain untrained. Step into the arena. Take calculated risks. Act without craving the result. Discomfort is your ally. Detachment is your guide. Action is your proof. Step 4. Observe, then detach. Act, then let go. Do not ruminate on results. Do not agonize over the response. Do not collapse into hope or fear. Observation without attachment trains calm. Observation without attachment trains precision. Observation without attachment trains freedom. You have a choice. React to the outcome and remain enslaved. Detach from outcome and become sovereign. That's the key. Now let's apply this to real life. Work and career. Most people are trapped by attachment to promotion, recognition, or success. They overthink. They overreact. They micromanage results. Detach. Focus on process.
execute flawlessly. Let the outcome follow naturally. Action without attachment. Relationships. Most people act from fear, hope, or neediness. They apologize too much. They argue too much. They manipulate to gain affection. Detach. Act with honesty. Act with principle. Do not hinge peace on approval. Action without attachment. Health and personal growth. Most people exercise, meditate, or eat well only when motivated. Motivation is a trap. Emotion is temporary. Detach from mood. Detach from desire. Act because it is required. Act because it is discipline. Action without attachment. Now let's get brutally honest. You can train all you want. You can endure discomfort. You can detach from outcomes. But if you do not act without attachment, all your training collapses. Every pause, every rule, every habit becomes just a theory. True mastery is revealed in motion. True mastery is revealed in real-world action, and real-world action must be detached. This is why warriors train without fear, why great leaders act calmly under fire, why peak performers step into pressure without clinging. They have learned the final truth. The outcome is irrelevant. The emotion is irrelevant. The judgment is irrelevant. Only the action matters. Only the principle matters. Only the discipline matters. You have a choice. Cling, collapse, remain weak. Detach, act, become unshakable. That's the key.
Now let's cement this with repetition. You have a choice. You don't need their permission. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. It's not about hope. It's about principle. It's not about outcome. It's about action. Action without attachment. Action without attachment. Action without attachment. Do this consistently. Do this relentlessly. Do this without flinching. And here is the final test. Every decision you make from this point forward, ask yourself, am I attached to the result? If yes, pause. If yes, detach. Then act. If no, act. Every single time. This is how mastery becomes habit. This is how strength becomes identity. This is how freedom becomes reality. Discomfort? Endure it. Calm? Maintain it. Detachment? Apply it. Action? Execute it without need. You have reached the summit. And now it is time to carry it into your life. You are no longer reactive. You are no longer enslaved by hope, fear, or judgment. You are no longer a slave to impulse. You are the master of your mind. You are the master of your emotions. You are the master of your actions. You have trained. You have endured. You have detached. You have acted. Now, one final truth. Emotional mastery is not an end. It is a lifestyle. It is the choice you make every moment. And every moment you choose wisely, you grow stronger. You grow freer. You grow unstoppable. This is the ultimate test, and you have passed it. Conclusion. You have learned every layer, the gap between impulse and action, the discipline that precedes pressure, the calm that disarms chaos, the detachment that clarifies thinking, the embrace of discomfort that builds strength, and finally, the art of acting without attachment. Now take it, apply it, live it.
Your life is no longer at the mercy of emotion. Your decisions are no longer enslaved by outcome. Your actions are no longer compromised by attachment. This is the power of emotional self-mastery, and the world will respect the person who has mastered themselves. Emotional self-mastery is not a personality trait. It is a practice. You were never meant to be ruled by your moods. You were never meant to surrender control to anger, fear, or ego. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you win. Every time you stay calm while others lose control, you rise. The strongest people are not loud. They are steady. The most dangerous minds are not emotional. They are precise. From this moment forward, your emotions no longer decide your actions. You decide. You breathe before you speak. You pause before you act. You think before you choose. This is your challenge. For the next 7 days, do not react immediately to anything. Not messages, not criticism, not stress. Create the pause, command the moment, and watch how your life begins to bend toward clarity, confidence, and control. Master your emotions, or they will master you.